Hi everyone, so it's Coach Fred and it's a quick review of solving inequalities. So from your algebra class, you may remember that solving an inequality is anything that has an inequality symbol. So we learned about greater than or less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So if I want to graph x is greater than 2, this example right here. Number one, it is much easier to graph them with the variable on the left, or at least I think it is. I could be wrong, but typically we like you to have the variable always on the left and read it from left to right, just like we do graphing. So to graph that, I'm going to make a number line. And I know 0 maybe is right about here, and here is 2 units. And this wants all x's greater than 2. Because it's just a greater than symbol, it's going to be an open circle, and I'm going to shade everything that way. Now, in some classes, your teacher might have had you shade under it. It's okay if you just draw like a nice thick arrow pointing that way, covering everything. This one says x is less than or equal to -3. So again, I have 0, and -3 is going to be right about here, and so I want every x less than or equal to, so I'm going to use a closed circle, and I'm going to go to the left. All right, so that's just a basic on inequalities. Now, we can make them a little bit more complicated where we have to solve the inequality. Those were already solved. So you have a couple methods. I know a lot of you are probably dying to distribute that 3, but I want to remind you that this is being multiplied. 3 is being multiplied to this quantity. So you can actually make it a little bit more efficient by dividing both sides by 3 first. Think of 2x minus 5 as the same thing as this, right? And you would divide by 3 on both sides first. So it's just kind of something to think about. All right, so that gives me 2x minus 5 is greater than 9. All right, solve it just like you would an equation. Pretend that's an equal sign, that inequality symbol. So we're going to balance the equation by adding 5 to both sides. And I hate seeing kids skip that step. And then dividing both sides by 2. And so that would give me x is greater than 7. Then we graph it on a number line. If it says solve and graph, then that's what you should do. Put 0 on the number line and 7, and I want all x's greater than 7. There are more complicated examples when you have variables on both sides, but again, you're going to treat it just like you would an equation. So I'm going to add 7x in this case to both sides. I like to bring the smaller variable to the larger, okay? And that's going to give me 2x plus 2 is less than 6. Then, let me switch colors, that's not so clear. Then I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, and that's going to give me 2x is less than 4, and then I'll divide by 2, okay? And so I get x is less than 2. And again, I'll graph it on a number line. So here's 0, so here's 2, and I want all x's less than 2, and I'm using that open circle. One big way this is different than an equation is when you have a negative that you're dividing or multiplying by. So let's pretend for a second I give you this equation. -2x plus 5 is greater than, we'll say 7. All right, so I solve and I isolate the variable just like I would in an equation. And I get -2x is greater than 2. All right, but now when I divide, I'm dividing both sides by a negative. So I actually have to remember to flip the inequality sign. Anytime you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip the inequality sign. So now we've made x less than -1. So x is less than -1. So here's 0, here's -1. I want x is less than -1. All right, so again, a couple of things. Remember that when working with inequalities, sometimes you can divide before you distribute. Reminder, we want to try and always keep the variable on the left. So if I gave you an inequality that had, say, maybe 3 is greater than or equal to x, I'd want to flip it around before I graph it. So x is less than or equal to 3. We always like to read it based on where the x is. And then the last one, important thing, when you divide or multiply an inequality by a negative, you do have to flip the direction of the inequality sign. All right, have a great day. Hopefully that helped.